Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed. Welcome in the chat. Today we are in the Philosophical Midwifery book once again. I have a new sound set up because the last video sounded like garbage. So I'm still messing with it a little bit to get it sounding good. How are you, Sus? Welcome. Let's turn down the volume a little bit. Alright, so hopefully that will sound a little bit better. So, we're in the Philosophical Midwifery book. Last time we jumped into the Republic, the end of book 6, to explore the divided line, to gain an understanding of what exactly is the difference between belief and understanding, the way we understand it in philosophy. Because we've been going through the case studies of people going through the art we are here to learn, the art of how to uncover, understand, and remove human problems. And it seems that the people that we are looking at have been in the game for a couple of years, and they are still exploring the early scenes where they picked up certain false beliefs about themselves that linger, that played a role throughout their whole lives and continue to play a role in their present, specifically blocking them from what they want to do in their lives. So if it takes that long, 2 years of work, and not just 2 years of work, 2 years of work with the guy who literally wrote the book on midwifery, that's pretty amazing. So, if it takes that long, if it's so difficult a journey, maybe not difficult, maybe difficult isn't the right word. If it requires that much reflection, we really want to understand what we are going through. What is the nature of belief? What is the nature of understanding? How are they related? And why is this such a significant process? We have been saying that it's the nature of evolution, the evolutionary process that we're going through, going from cavemen, barbarians, and if a good person to pick out that represents the pathologos on a mass scale is Donald Trump. Loyal, fervent supporters of him, immune from reason and evidence, it seems, justifying the worst possible actions that a leader could take against his own people and against human beings themselves and the planet that we live on. So, real savagery within our species. On one side of the fence, on the other side of the fence, well, we have somebody like Socrates. Somebody not only understanding the art, not only demonstrating the art in his time, but passing on a teaching to us even today. The teaching that potentially can allow us to solve the problems that we are facing and turn this ship around. So, what is the nature of belief in comparison to understanding? Is it a continuum? Or is it what we discovered last time, an incommensurate jump? Two completely different things with completely different objects of focus. meaning we have to leave one behind in order to participate in the other. So that's what we looked at last time. Perhaps we'll do a quick review of our notes and the reading, just to refresh us, and then we'll jump back into chapter 5, subject B, the second half of his midwife talk. So let's jump on over to the board and play the noise. A bit loud. And then we go to here. And that's not the right thing. Yeah, and just so you know, I'm tired, I'm sleepy. I was out playing music last night. It's Saturday night or Sunday morning for me. And then I went to the gym and I couldn't sleep. So I thought I'll do a stream. So I'm a bit sleepy, but who cares? I might as well do a stream. Because if I got free time and it's too early in the morning to practice music, this is the other thing that I do. So it's fun. And all my friends are here in chat. Hello, all the friends in chat. So this is our board where we went through the exercise in book 6 to create a line. Where's my pen? Draw a line, says Socrates in book 6. And then divide it up in a section. We used about a quarter. Then use that to divide. Call one side the visible world, the world of becoming, the one that most people are familiar with, and the other one the intelligible realm, the one that we focus on in philosophy. Use that same proportion to cut these ones as well, which actually leaves us in an interesting space because we have 2 and 3 that are equal. You can try that yourself. If you draw a line and you cut it by proportion and you cut each of those by that same proportion, you'll find something interesting. These two are the same. So we have a puzzle that we can wonder about. What's the significance about these two being the same? Can we therefore turn this whole divided line into a mean analogy, which is A is to B as B is to C? A special kind of analogy where it's only 3 terms instead of a usual 4-term analogy, because the middle term is doing double duty. Like, for instance, Diotima taught Socrates as Socrates is teaching us. So teacher is to student as teacher is to student. Is there a way of seeing this? No, we're not doing that right now, but it is interesting that it's there to play with for later. But for now, what we saw is in the visible world, we have image thinking, which ends up in trust or belief. On the other side of the line, there's dianoia or understanding. Philodianoia is the new art that we're learning here. Which, when applied in the dialectic, results in nous. And the problem that Glaucon has is he wasn't able to recognize, probably because he's unfamiliar with the realm of being, that each of these different cognitive functions have a different object. We don't apply understanding to the physical world. understanding, dianoia, is about the intelligible realm. Where the principles and causes of the visible realm lie. Now, what we are doing in midwifery is something interesting. We are using our understanding to turn back and help others through the process of discovering their false beliefs, just turn down this light a little bit. That's better. Discovering the false beliefs they carry, that they generated from the visible realm, from their childhood, that keep them tied to image thinking, and specifically a false image about the self. By directing them to the objects, the man-made objects that caused their image thinking. In other words, what were the family beliefs and family ways of being that we were that the individual was exposed to in childhood, from which they derived a false belief about themselves and the world. Or another way of looking at it is, hey, the parental figures in the origin scene that we all have, by the way, this is for everyone. The images, the appearance of our parental figures or significant family members in our childhood, were they reflections of something? Did they appear beautiful? Did they appear knowing? Did they appear caring? Did they have the shadow of strength or power? And from these image thinking, did we ourselves end up with a belief, a false belief about the self that we identify with, that keeps us trapped in the physical world, and keeps us trapped in a level of cognition that is only relative to the physical world, the visible world. In other words, preventing us from making the spiritual, the learning, the evolutionary movement from our problems, image thinking, and belief to truly entering the human race, being able to share an understanding and nous. The experience of ousia, the capacity that we have to awaken our intellect and know our own mind, or turn about upon our own mind and know ourselves directly in that way. It's sometimes called the brilliant light of pure being. These are synonymous terms. And this is the object of study in philosophy, because it's the intelligible realm that can be apprehended either through understanding or through direct apprehension of nous. That is the cause of and the conditions for our physical world. So, one of the things that we notice in our everyday world are people who are tied in image thinking, moved by shapes and colors, the sexists and the racists who point at shapes and colors different from what they're used to and say, bad, I want them to suffer. because they are blindly loyal to belief, when they talk about what's good or just or right or how we should live in the world, they are unable to talk about principles, things that are universal, things that are true for everyone. So they say things like, hey, I think billionaires should exist, but only me and my friends. I think slavery is good, but only when I get to have slaves. I don't want to be a slave. I think genocide is good, so long as we're doing it to other people, not to me and my friends and my family. In other words, it's not a universal principle that they're pointing to. It's a blind allegiance to someone or something, their earliest teachers. Beliefs. Now, the nature of the intelligible realm, being, has aspects that we can apprehend, such as it can be apprehended as goodness itself, beauty itself, everything perfectly ordered the way it should be, or justice itself. So our model for things that we do need to look to for principles in our world exist in the intelligible realm. We want a just world. We want our rulers to act in a good way towards us. We want our creations to be beautiful. These are all aspects, or the Greek word is eidos, of the brilliant light of being, or the intelligible realm, which cannot be apprehended through image thinking or belief. Therefore, people who are loyal to the images that they are used to, the images that they grew up with. So if there's a tyrant that comes along who has the appearance, the shadow, the image is the reflection of the cause of their image thinking, parental figures, they're the ones people become loyal to. People become Nazi about, people become MAGA about, people become fascistic about. Now, what we are discovering in midwifery is there is a certain class of belief, a certain class of image about the self that is immune from any evidence and reason that can show them that it's false. It behaves kind of like a principle. It's taken for granted as being true, not understood as being true. And it's the cause, or it functions as the motivating force in a human being's life, particularly when they're engaged in something meaningful or beautiful, something resembling the intelligible, something important for someone. Therefore, this class of belief, being immune from being sort of inoculated against understanding, can't be removed with simple learning, with evidence and reason. This is the pathologos that we are discovering. Every human being gets it. It's part of being a person. It's part of having a childhood. It's part of being raised in a house. And this model of the divided line from Book 6 of the Republic helps us see what it is that we've been talking about. and also shows us the significance of making this jump. How do you make this jump? That's philosophical midwifery. By having someone who is learning understanding, which we are doing by reading the text. Change my light, look a bit weird. To ask questions of someone in this realm about the cause of their false beliefs, encouraging them to participate with the Logos and Usia. Logos and Usia is the nature of the intelligible realm. Usia, pure Usia, the capacity of mind to know itself, that's the intelligible. The understandability of it, the rationality of that experience, that's the Logos. So, by engaging in the dialectic of midwifery, which we saw last time, is the power, it's how we use the self-logos, encouraging somebody who is genuinely interested in uncovering their pathologos to free themselves from their own problems so they can make this jump. By asking them questions, we are following the dialectic. That's dianoia. We're encouraging these people to participate in that as well. But specifically, different from this. What this is showing is the dialectic normally in philosophy is applied to the intelligible. That's the whole thing that Glaucon was missing. But what we are seeing in midwifery is there is another use of the dialectic applied to these things to free ourselves from these things, giving us the freedom to then participate in the dialectic directed to the intelligible, awaken our nous, awaken the intellect. So two different uses of the dialectic. One outlined in Book 6 of the Republic, philosophy, the functioning of a philosopher king or queen, which is the use of the dialectic we're learning, which is the power of the self-logos directed towards, hey, not using any of these, not using any of the images and shadows, using the ideal selves, the aspects of the intelligible, to create hypotheses. You don't know it yet. These are if statements. Remember, we carry questions and hypotheses in our inventory, in our question sack, and in our inventory, in our hypothesis, our if sack, so that we can trigger an illumination experience, a nous experience, awaken that dormant eye of the soul. In Book 7, Socrates says, the eye of the soul is worth more than 1,000 physical eyes. Which was kind of weird, because how can you imagine a person with 1,000 eyes? What a freak. Now, there is an episode of Naruto where there is a guy who has collected many Sharingan eyes, because they're magical eyes that have magical powers within the realm of Naruto. He is a bad dude. That's the closest metaphor I can think of that makes sense of Socrates saying that the eye of the soul, that we are awakening through the dialectic applied to in the intelligible realm, that eye that we awaken is worth more than 1,000 Sharingans, what we would say today. Now, in order to be able to play that game without the distracting fantasies, thoughts, tangents, inner self-talk telling you that you're not capable, or to give up, or do something else, do something physical. The freedom to participate in this high use of the dialectic requires a freedom from what keeps us on this side of the game. A freedom from our blind allegiance to unsuspected false beliefs, to image thinking, specifically a false image of the self that we identify with. That's midwifery. The use of the dialectic to free ourselves from that realm, allowing us to make this evolutionary jump, spiritual jump, learning jump. By the way, what we are also learning in midwifery is to adequately go through this art of midwifery, you have to learn it yourself. I mean, you don't have to at the beginning, but as you go through it, you learn more and more about it just by being in it. But also, the more that you learn it, the more you read the book, like we're doing together, the better you'll be able to navigate yourself, because it's a mutual effort. It's not something being done to you. Sure, you benefit by having a guide, by having a midwife, having somebody else who's gone through the process or is learning the process with you. But they ask the questions that allow you to surface the logos. And they ask the questions that direct your ousia upon that logos for you to gain questions about. There's the question sack. And to create conclusions about. That's your if sack, the two sacks, the question sack and your if sack, the hypothesis sack. A hypothesis is an if. If this is the case, then that follows. You don't know it yet. You carry it because it's this experience of nous that confirms. It's the confirmation. It's knowledge. To anyone who says you can't know the nature of the divine, you can't know the mind of God, you have to wait till you die, they're lying to you. Or they're ignorant themselves and they don't know they're lying. Either way, it's false. Now, don't just believe me. You can verify this. That's the game. So what? So by being engaged in this art, we are learning the dialectic in order to free ourselves from this realm and once we have the freedom, we've got this practice and study of the dialectic in our back pocket that we can then use to apply it to the real, which is fascinating because the whole power of our pathologos is the shadow of the real. It's in these origin scenes that seem like a spiritual teaching. We're reading this guy fixing a lawnmower with his papa. A rare moment where him and his dad are fixing the thing together, and he turns to him and he says, "You can't fix small things." The teaching. His first spiritual teacher, his parent, is telling him about himself. That's the Dharma. Only it's bullshit. It's the fake version. It's the distortion of it. So what? So in going through philosophical midwifery, not only are we learning the art of dianoia, of understanding, the dialectic, how we make use of the self-logos, we're also gaining insight into the nature of the intelligible itself by studying what it isn't. Or its aspects, but in its distorted form. Isn't that neat? We're doing two things at once.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win.
A win-win. So that's what we covered last time. We also put on this side, the visible realm is the realm of opinions. Hey, no one cares about our dumb opinions, except our kids when they have to. There was a one of those YouTube slop content things of 20 fascists against one rational person. Anyway, these you can see how delighted these young fascists were to be on this platform to debate someone, but it really highlights how bullshit debate is. This is dialectic, by the way, the opposite of debate. Because debates are about your dumb opinions. Hey, even if you have understanding, a debate just presents it as an opinion. The dialectic is a mutual process that we're learning that brings everyone up together to see. That's why we have questions. That's why we have hypotheses. That's why we help people give birth to their insights. Even if you have true insight, you're not presenting it as a dumb opinion. That's why we read together. This is something we created together by reading the book together. And in doing so, we were learning how to read. There were some times where we had to go into the lexicon and find the Greek translation. To check if the translation of the author was accurate, or if we could find something better ourselves, more accurate ourselves. We find puzzles. We found a couple of puzzles that we haven't been able to solve yet. Like this one. The one that we ended with. The divided line isn't complete. That's a big puzzle. Another puzzle. How come Socrates said, I'm not going to talk about this? Said Glaucon. Another puzzle. Did Glaucon understand understanding? If not, why not? Puzzles. And the most important puzzle we're here to solve is ourselves. That's why this is better than a koan. A koan is a kind of spiritual question given to you by someone else. A spiritual person. Like, hey, here's a weird question that you can't solve with logic, so you can meditate on it and so on. You don't need it. Why? Because we have a question. We are naturally puzzled about ourselves. Why can't we reach our highest goals? Why can't we remember the nature of reality? That we must have known for us to recognize aspects of nous like beauty and justice without actually having learnt it at school. No one taught you what beautiful things are, but you recognize it straight away. Even this dumbest people way down here, the shapes and colors people, they like pretty women's, don't they? Their reaction to it is weird and fascistic usually, and full of anger and oppression. Why? Notice, these people who are so angry and vehement in how they must take away any rights of women, their reproductive rights, any right of any kind. They're not this riled up about, I don't know, traffic congestion or alternative sources of parking. No. They're directing their fascistic tendencies to what they consider most interesting to them. That's why these priests that are all like, hey, being gay is the devil, turn out to be gay themselves because they're interested in it. Our problems surface, as we're seeing in midwifery, when we approach what's meaningful and beautiful to us. Why? Because when we were engaged in our most meaningful and beautiful activities as a child, that's when we got our dharma, our first spiritual teaching. That's when our parental figures came in and said, No way. And they crushed us in a similar way that they were crushed. That's the passing on of the injustice. That's why these people are so obsessed with abusing women. Because they consider women beautiful. How? They learn about it? No. We recognize it because this is what we saw in the Phaedo and in the Mino. We remember it in some way. From where? In other words, it wasn't in the visible realm, meaning we have had already some experience of the intelligible realm. And this is what we read in an earlier chapter of the midwifery book too. Because one of the puzzles is why reincarnate into a world where you get a pathologos problem that causes all this crazy injustice at every level, individually, collectively, and as a society. Why get stuck down here? And there was a hypothesis posited, again, we won't know until we can verify it for ourselves, that before we were incarnated, there was something that preventing us from participating in this intelligible realm in a greater depth, or we missed a certain kind of opportunity, maybe even an opportunity to go beyond, which was some sort of cause for us being incarnated into a species, a time frame, a household with a specific pathologos, blocking you from participating in the intelligible, remembering the experience of the intelligible, of beauty itself, of justice itself, of goodness itself, of intelligibility itself, blocking us from that, and instead picking up some false teaching about it, some block to it. You can't do it. You're not good enough. That kind of stuff. And what we also saw is every pathologos is unique, meaning the simple fact that your pathologos is unique to you means that your soul must have had some sort of interpretation, some sort of issue that makes, even if you are born in the same family with a twin, the fact that you are going to interpret your shadows, your man-made objects, your man-made beliefs differently says you are bringing with you some sort of issue, some sort of uniqueness to your particular soul. And that uniqueness causes your particular snowflake, your particular pathologos. Meaning your problem is at least in some way brought with you, which allows us to reflect on the greater meaning or justice behind the apparent injustice of getting this insidious kind of parasite, psychic parasite, zombie virus, the pathologos. And living in a world showing us the implications of not doing midwifery, our pathologos gets played out in politics, in society, in capitalism, in genocide, and so on and so on. But the fact that we are interested in ourselves, we are curious about our problems. Yes, a lot of people misuse that curiosity and project it on others and then get angry at the injustice of others when it's not others they're angry at, it's a projection. And by the way, projection means you're not dealing with the present properly. You're projecting something onto the present. And we're learning in how we're learning to read, how to read without interpretation, how to read without projecting stuff into the text that isn't there, and without leaving out stuff that is there. So, if we are projecting something, if we are adding something to the present, where did it come from? It must be from our past. So understanding our particular pathologos allows us to understand the cause of our projections. Why is that significant? Because it's those projections that people get mad about. It's the priests that are mad about homosexuality that actually turn out to be gay themselves. You pick a problem. That's why they say so the people who identify with clans and groups like the right wing, that we say of them, oh, every accusation is a confession. Why? Because they're projecting their problem onto someone else instead of doing what they're here for, reflect on themselves, because many of them haven't ever reflected on themselves. They've never had anybody ask them questions about themselves to create the conditions for reflection. This is why this game is so interesting. It's new. Being a midwife, asking questions. I've never been asked a question about myself before. I've heard a lot of opinions, and I pick a team that have opinions that kind of sound like mine. Without self-reflection, how do we deal with our koan, our question, that which we're most curious about? Our snowflake, our pathologos that we get because of our problem that our soul had, that limits us from our highest goal. If you're not practiced in self-reflection, which ideally is the dialectic, you project it. And you get mad at the other person. And you want to genocide the other person. Ever heard what Netanyahu and the other people supporting that genocide are saying? They're always playing the victim. It's Hamas's fault. They're the ones who are lying as they lie. They're the ones who are stealing the food as they starve people to death. Projection. And to get mad at that injustice they're projecting while doing it themselves. That's the human problem. That's the pathologos. That's what we're looking at here. We're understanding it. So the cause of projection must be something we're carrying from the past that we haven't dealt with. That's the cause of our anger, as we've been reading. But what we are actually here to do, and if we lived in a sane or rational world, this would be our education system. Our whole society would be meeting everybody's basic needs, not giving everything to billionaires, which is fucking crazy, but meeting everybody's basic human needs that are universal, therefore a principle which should be guiding politics, so that we can do what we're here for, reflect on our specific problem that we're naturally curious about. We wonder about ourselves. And we have anger until we address it, because the mind is not content with you carrying an insult and injustice against the self. That's the anger. So our anger is good in a sense. It reminds us, I'm not going to settle for this. Reality does not want me to settle for a false idea of self and reality. That's anger. The problem is we're not creating the conditions for philosophical midwifery. So instead of reflecting on it as our koan, our spiritual question that can awaken us to a higher cognitive function, a higher level of evolution, and do what we were born for, we project it on other people. And if you got a lot of money or power, you do it with bombs and starving children to death. That's our issue. That's where we are. This is the turning point. We either pick this game up or we continue to project our koan to the death of our species, to the extinction of it. We'll be just another species like many others who have gone extinct. We have awoken to the ability to use self-logos, language, reason. We have awakened the capacity to self-reflect, ousia. Pure ousia is the intelligible. The understandability, the rationality of that, the knowability of that is the logos. We have that capacity. Socrates told us about it all the time. but we fucking killed the guy. So what? So we have the capacity for self-reflection, ousia, with the self-logos or dialectic. If we don't do this, we will end up just continuing to project it on others, getting angry at the injustice that we are not dealing with ourselves, and playing that out to a nuclear Armageddon. Or individually, we will continue to play out our suffering individually, pass it on to the next generation, and suffer whatever consequences come with that refusal to do what we're here for, awaken our koan, reflect on ourselves with the dialectic, with the self-logos, and solve the issue our soul had coming in. Whether it's some sort of punishment for acting unjustly, or whether it's a further exacerbation of whatever problem we had coming in, seeing as we spent our life becoming further identified with our problem, with our image of the self, our ego, meaning whatever problem we came in with, we spent our life not freeing ourselves from it, but becoming further identified with it. That's what debate does. You come into an argument with the opinions you have, which are wrong because you're a human being, and opinions are not knowable intelligibility. Opinions aren't dianoia. Opinions aren't nous. Opinions aren't of the intelligible. Opinions are in the book, this realm. Knowable selves are in this realm. And he said, arrange them according to truth and clarity. This is obscurity. This is clarity. This is truth. This is falsehood. A debate means you have to fight for your particular falsehood, your particular opinions, your particular problem. The koan that you are not supposed to believe but have a question about, you are forced to defend whenever you get arrested by the cops, whenever the teacher's going to give you a bad grade, or in a debate. That's why rewards and punishment are bad, harmful, always, because you have to pretend oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Don't punish me. I was right from birth. I've never made a mistake in my life. You heard Trump talk? It was a perfect call. Never made a mistake in my life. Never done a lewd drawing in my life. Never associated with anyone bad in my life. Everything was perfect. We know he's lying, but we haven't asked the question why he's lying. That's our system. Our system isn't based on truth. If it was based in truth, we would never have punishments. It's based on lying about being enlightened already, so that there isn't an excuse to inflict suffering on you as teaching, punishment, which is fucking insane. You wouldn't be born if you knew everything. That's the koan. That's why we're here. Because we didn't know something. We don't know something. Our whole system is based around entrenching us in the very problem we are here to solve through punishment. That's why the most fascistic people are looking for any excuse to punish somebody else so they can avoid the punishment themselves. To the point where they'll invent something. You have to suffer because you're brown. You have to suffer because you're a woman. You have to suffer because you're poor. We are inventing excuses to inflict punishment. It's insane. If we recognize why we're here, the divided line, philosophical midwife. So what? So again, we have to recognize that we're not here to punish people for having a human problem, but to create the conditions for reflection upon that problem. Otherwise, people will just try and look for a position of power where they can project their own koan, their own puzzle, their own question on someone else to punish them for it. So what's Netanyahu doing? Punishing the Palestinians for his fucking problem. His injustice. We call him a cry bully. What's Trump doing? Everything Trump has said. has been a projection of his own problem so that he can punish someone else instead of getting punished. How about stopping punishment, hey? Can you have the conditions for what we are here for, to discover our koan that we come in with as a soul, to create the conditions of midwifery to reflect on it, to learn what we're here to learn, so we can cross this line? Can that happen with punishment, with a punitive justice system? No, it can't. Of course it can't. Think about anything you've learned. Okay, that's a bad example because of our system at the moment. If you are doing a math equation, 1 + 1 = 3, does the math teacher shame you or punish you or starve you or bomb you for making a mistake? Never. Why? Because we know, 50 years ago they used to hit children, but just fuck. But we know that this doesn't create the conditions for learning. It's time to grow up and create the conditions for learning, which is creating the conditions for philosophical midwife. Which means we don't need koans, because we're naturally curious about ourselves, so much so that we will project our puzzle and anger at the injustice onto others and then bomb the shit out of them. That's how curious we are. We need to make use of that curiosity. Why? Because that's one of the aspects of the dialectic. You have to be curious. We have to stop this debate crap too. Because debate literally means become more entrenched in the opinions you have, the beliefs you already carry. So you walk away having defended it, more entrenched in the same ignorance that you came in with. It's absurd. So what's the alternative? This guy. What we've been learning on this channel in everything we do, whether it be philosophy, midwifery, dream analysis, or in our creation. The 4 aspects of the love of understanding. They all use the dialectic. Isn't that neat? It's a win-win-win-win-win.
It's a win-win-win-win-win. It's a win-win-win-win-win. It's a win-win-win-win-win. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
A win-win-win-win-win. We're doing. Isn't that neat? We are natural, spiritually adept people, or we're naturally all monks. We don't need a koan. Our koan is our pathologos. Our problem. To have a just life, to be a just person, and therefore, if it's the justice of the soul, demonstrated by Socrates, by the way, it's also commensurate or the same as justice of a society and justice as a species within a greater universe. Which is simply what? Creating the conditions for philosophical midwifery. Which does what? It makes use of the dialectic and self-logos that we learn by reading to, with our friends, mutually, friendlily, with as much grace and charm as we can muster. Some have more than others, but that's the fun part of being here. Some people are naturally graceful or charming and can keep their cool and stick with reason and encourage people to participate in reflection. That's wonderful that there are these people around. Some people, maybe like me, get sweary sometimes, but then I hug my stuffy and I calm down. To learn the dialectic and self-logos through reading the book together, which we're naturally interested in anyway, it's a fun book. To apply it with our friends mutually to ask apply that dialectic in picking the questions to ask them that will surface their own logos, and then ask them questions to ousia upon that logos. Logos and ousia, the two aspects of being an evolved being or evolving being, the conditions for evolution, the nature of the intelligible itself, so that we can see, so we can see and address the causes of our beliefs, apply that understanding to judge them for what they are. The more that we study the true nature of beauty and justice will allow us to better challenge them. Hey, that wasn't just, that wasn't beautiful. Mama, Papa, our earliest teachers, like we're seeing in subject A and subject B. Now reading. Allowing us to let go of, dissolve, and gain freedom from what binds us to this side of the divided line, the realm of the visible and opinions and obscurity and falsehood, which gives us the freedom to therefore cross this line and participate in the higher use of the dialectic and self-logos, which we've been learning all along in freeing ourselves from our koan, our question, our puzzle, our problem. So now we have the dialectic practice and understanding in our back pocket, and a freedom to use it in the higher way, the dianoia applied to understanding the nature of the intelligible, which awakens our nous, the experience of the brilliant light of pure being, mind knowing itself as pure being, as the eternal. And then, equally so, applying our dianoia to our nous to make sense of it, understand it, recognize the eidos, the aspects of it, maybe go into it deeper, maybe see the self-logos in there as well. Gain mastery of philosophy. Making us a better midwife and making us a better guide or dialectician for others to do the other side as well. And then bringing both of them together and wondering about the question that we ended with last time. If that's the process of gaining an understanding and mastery of this realm, which wasn't using this understanding, not having beliefs about our beliefs. I believe all my opinions are right. Yeah, you and everyone else. That's why I like people who say, I'm a realist. It's another way of saying, I agree with all of my own opinions. It's not having beliefs about our beliefs. It's not having images about our beliefs. It's not having beliefs about our images. We are going over the divided line. We're borrowing from understanding. We're using understanding to gain a mastery of this, to move, to let go of this, to move to that side. But hang on a second. Yeah, that's midwifery to do that. And then philosophy is to use that dianoia or this side of the divided line to bring both of these together. Hang on a second. What if we take that whole journey we've been on and say, what about here? What about here? What about this? Is there a similar process that we went through in midwifery to take this cognitive function from a higher realm to apply it back, use an understanding of beliefs? Remember how we recognized there were 5 classes of belief: axiom, scientific beliefs, simple beliefs, supernatural beliefs, prejudice beliefs, and the insidious pathologos beliefs.
Wow.
No, don't cheer. No, don't cheer. Don't cheer. Don't. Stop.
I've been a bad little girl.
That's better. Pathologos is a bad girl. So notice how we haven't been saying, oh, what beliefs do you agree with? What beliefs does Jesus or Moses or Joseph Smith say or Zenu say is the best? No, we're not doing beliefs about beliefs like you get in church. We're gaining an understanding of beliefs, meaning we are using this cognitive function. Let's delete all this. We've been using this cognitive function, applying it to this realm to learn the art to free ourselves from this realm, from those two. But hang on a second. If image thinking is about our beliefs, people who are stuck in their problems, most people currently, and dianoia is about what we apprehend in nous, can we awaken a puzzle? Could we then say, hang on a second, Socrates doesn't say after you do midwifery and dream analysis, then you get into philosophy and that's the end of the game. He doesn't say that. He says to Glaucon, as we read, I'm not going to talk about what's beyond this line, but it's there. Philophronesis. If this is philodoxia, the love of opinions, if this is philosophia, the love of wisdom, what's philophronesis? And why does Socrates end his books with a puzzle about that? If we can go through this journey, could we use analogy to say there might be a similar process of this to free ourselves from this to allow that? Could there be a similar process of a different type of cognition that can be applied to our wisdom, our direct experience of pure being, understood through the dialectic and dianoia? Can even that be transcended? Is there a similar midwifery art you apply to not the love of opinions, but the love of wisdom? Is there a similar midwifery to philosophy? Freeing ourselves from even wisdom, allowing us to traverse this gap? That sounds like one hell of a, or one heaven of a question. Can we answer it? I don't know. If you're able to answer it, join the Discord and please share your insights with us in chat. That's where it goes, right? Just as we have to be learning this dialectic in the process of midwifery because it's a mutual exploration. You're not passive. It's not something done to you like at the dentist. Would there be a similar art here? Or similar or different? Would it be the dialectic? Would it be an even higher function of the dialectic? Would it be a new thing? That can be applied here to free ourselves from this realm. And in going through that understanding process, when we do cross that line, we have some practice and understanding of that tool that can be applied to whatever is the object of cognition in this realm. What is the object of cognition here? And what is the art that's used to facilitate the insight of it? Just like image thinking creates belief or dianoia is applied to nous. What a question. So we can ask, therefore, if this is a fantastic, awesome, kick-ass question about the self, because Socrates said it's the good self that's here, that I'm not going to tell you about, Glaucon. if this is the best kind of question about what we are most curious about ourselves, and every living human being is a self, what conclusions can we make about our world? Would the paradigm, the principle that's universally true, because it applies to everyone, that benefits everyone, and therefore a principle, would the principle for all governance and spirituality, or every system within society, to create the conditions to give birth to this question about the self? Meaning all universal, because everyone has the same basic human needs and has the same higher human need as well, using the technology and resources available to most efficiently, renewably, and sustainably meet all human needs without there being any hoarding or billionaires or any bullshit like that, or slaves. All this billionaire shit is just another way of saying slavery. All this racism is just another way of saying slavery. All this sexism is just another way of saying slavery, or the harming of other human beings. That's not benefit. That's therefore not universal. That's therefore not a principle. So what would be the principle for all governance and all good functioning of human souls individually and collectively? To create the conditions to surface this question. Can you surface this question if you are being bombed? No bombing. Can you surface this question if there is a starving class and a opulent rich class that has $1 billion steaks every lunch time? No. So no hoarding of wealth, no billionaire class. Can you surface this question if we dump half of our food into the water, into the trash can, into the ocean, because it increases profits for the ownership class? No, then none of that shit too. Can you create the conditions for this question without teaching and creating the conditions for midwifery? No. So therefore, all human needs met most renewably, sustainably, and all that crap. Not crap. All that normal stuff. Efficiently, renewably, using all technology, not hoarding it for the military or bullshit like that, which is just another way of hoarding it to harm people. That's not a principle. So there goes the military-industrial complex. Thank fuck. Creating the conditions for midwifery to go through here, for philosophy to master this, and to surface this question, which is what we're here for. So we have our principle. So all debates should be nothing other than how best can we facilitate that. How best can we facilitate the implementation of that, the universal principle? Not whether or not it's good to harm people. No, that's not a principle. Or whether it's good to have a slave class. No, that's not universal, not a principle. If this is the principle of what we are here for, by definition, and demonstrably so, then all debates or political commentary should simply be about how to create the conditions for this. And anyone who says, but I think we should have patents on technology. Oh, okay. Well, you're not in the discourse of how to create the conditions for this, but you are surfacing a personal problem, your koan. If you're resisting this, then you are surfacing a block to truth and benefit and universality, meaning a block to crossing this line. That's part of being human, not just knowing the truth, but surfacing everything that is in opposition to truth and benefit. But I like kicking puppies. Oh, really? Now, we don't compromise and let people kick some puppies. No. We don't compromise with fascists. No. We don't punish them either. We don't kick them. We recognize that we are all human selves in this evolutionary process. So if they've got a problem, we all can learn from it. Just like every midwife talk, the subjects benefited, but the midwife themselves benefit too. They can gain insight into the nature of problems, or gain an insight into their own problem that might be similar, or gain some insight into humanness or humanity by facilitating a human being through that process, or gain an insight into insight because they have an insight through this process, or gain an insight into the dialectic as they pass it on and use it. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win-win-win.
It's a win-win-win-win-win. So yes, when we have these conversations about how we implement this which is universally beneficial and therefore the principle, there are going to be people who say, oh, I don't like that. Good. That's midwifery. We have to do that too. Just like when we read Plato and learn about philosophy and phronesis, there is going to be a part of us that says, give up on philosophy, you can't know anything, or reality isn't knowable, or it's just a matter of faith. We don't compromise with that because its whole thing is to stop the benefit. Fascists harm people. Bombs harm people. Starvation harms people. You don't compromise with what is bad. That's stupid. We recognize that tangent as surfacing part of our question that our soul has, which is some sort of opposition to the intelligible, which was why we were born in the first place. Yes, we currently don't live in this system, meaning we have all these puzzles that every single human being will help surface, because everyone will have some sort of opposition to this. It's part of having a pathologos. Pathologos functions to block the logos. The logos is the intelligibility, the universal understandability of that which is beneficial. So yes, there'll be objections. People trying to assassinate the good people. Now, we don't allow assassinations, of course, that's fucking stupid, but we have to, hey, you want to kill, oh, really? You have a strong objection to what will help you and everyone. Interesting. Part of our human experience. Oh, but I want to bury that file away. Why? Because I'll be killed or put in prison or assassinated. No, we don't do that anymore. Because it's stupid. You have a problem. Newsflash, we all do. What's the prison system? Another excuse for fucking slavery. That's all it is. Just more slavery. Oh, but now the billionaires get to have another slave class, the prisoner class. Used to be the women and the brown people, the black people. Now that's not good anymore. So it's the poor people. Oh, and the criminals. Oh, now make everyone who, but now what's Trump doing? Like everyone who's different from, everyone who's not white is by definition illegal. Therefore, by definition, a criminal. Now we have slavery again. It's just slavery with extra steps. And what's slavery? The same bullshit pathologos oppression of another person. Why? Because our model of what's true and good was our parental figures who enslaved us in a kind of way. That's the pathologos. Everything that involves punishment or prisons or illegally making someone illegal is just the pathologos with extra steps. That's it. Projection, anger, punishment, it's just pathologos with extra steps. Therefore, what are we here to do? Create the conditions as a midwife, as a friend, as a lover, and as a society, which means no punishment, no blame, just creating the conditions for self-reflection and curiosity and wonder. That's our koan, our spiritual question that we're here to solve. And you know what? We can free ourselves from it. That's the story of Achilles in the Iliad. The story of Achilles in the Iliad is the worst person with the biggest problem. The biggest meanie jerk, terrible man. going through dream analysis and midwifery to be able to free himself from this line. Hey, from this section of the divided line, he said to his divine mother, his half god, Achilles is half god. So the family he left behind was literally chosen by the gods, as every pathologos thinks their particular family tradition is specifically chosen. That's why religions work. You are picked by God. You're the Jews, you're the Catholics, you're the whites, you're the Scientologists, you're the whatever. It's just pathologos with extra steps. Achilles said, I'm not going to be a part of your chosen by the god tradition because I've seen through it with the help of my dreams and philosophical midwifery. He was able to cross this line. He had a divine illumination experience of the intelligible on the battlefield. But that wasn't the end. He had to reflect on it with understanding to go beyond it, and he did. Achilles. Meaning we can do it too. And it's understandable. Not as a matter of belief, not as an image, as something we can understand for ourselves through the use of dialectic and the self-logos and confirm in our own direct experience, and then even experience in a certain kind of way beyond experience in the knowing of self. Every question about what is good or what is true love, what is a good relationship, or how the world should be run, or what political party. No, it's just this. Why? Because political policies are supposed to be based on principles. Principles have to be universally applicable. So no slavery, no pathologos with extra steps. No ownership class and slave class. No illegal people and legal people. No poor people and rich people. It's just pathologos or oppressing of another soul with extra steps. So all the conversation will be is, what would be the most fun and quickest way of establishing the conditions for this? That's it. While at the same time making use of any objection to that, anyone that says, I don't think we should have fairness for everyone. Oh, how can we make use of people's objections to learn more about the pathologos? To better master midwifery for that particular person to address his individual problem, but to look at the conditions within society that gave rise to that kind of pathologos so we don't have to live it out again? So we don't have to keep fighting Nazis? How many times do we have to keep fighting Nazis? 0 more times. If we wake up to this. Sound like fun? Called the noblest game. The love of understanding. Why? Because understanding is used here in midwifery. It's used here to create the conditions for knowing the intelligible. It's applied to our experience of that insight in Nous to go beyond it. It's turtles all the way down. It's dialectic all the way through. It's the self-logos all the way through. Therefore, dialectic and logos, what's the name for that? Dianoia. What's the art? What's the one principle what used to be debates but now dialectics about political discourse should be? How do we both best implement and most quickly implement Dianoia? The principle, the universal. And as we saw here, the paradigm for understanding human problems. So, I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to pause the recording. But then we're going to read through that same thing we just read last time. So we read through the text the first time to gain this model. We reflected on this model today to gain new insights applying it to what we're doing in midwifery, applying it to what we're doing in philodianoia, and applying it to our species, and also the new version of YouTube content now that everyone knows this. In other words, we read it, dianoia, dialectic. We had an insight as a result of it. But then what do you do with your insight? You apply understanding to it again to go beyond. So similarly, we read the text. We had the insight as a result of our ousia, our reflection on it. Now we're going to reread it again to see whether this experience sheds new light on our understanding. We're demonstrating the model that we've been defining. Sound like fun?
Where's the joy? Where's the whimsy? Where's the childlike wonder, dude?
Right here. Right, I'm back. Let's jump back into the text. And let's reread that after our reflection and see if we can see anything new. Or, I don't know, gain confirmation of what we were hypothesizing. Let's see. Now, we started right before when Socrates' student Glaucon was saying, "Oh, holy Jesus, goddamn, Mother of Mary, Joseph and Mary and Jesus. Holy crap." About something. We had to go back a little bit behind that and see what he was freaking out about. So we can say, "Hey, Glaucon."
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
But really,
You've been a bad little girl and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now?
why would Emma say that on the majority report? All right. Now we can already see that when we do get into the Republic on this channel, there's some good stuff here, like the offspring of the good generates something analogous to self, the intelligible place, the objects of the intellect, and how it relates to the sun and the visible place. There's a power being dispensed from there. How the sun relates to our eyes, so to the experience of the good, or the idea of the good. The idea of the good is that nous. The idea of the good isn't a concept. The eidos is in Greek is to behold, is the experience of the good. So he's saying, hey, for there to be an experience of the good that we call being or nous, the brilliant light of being, has to be a cause which is beyond that in dignity and power. So a lot of awesome, fun, cool, wicked stuff to explore when we get into the Republic. So a little teaser. Or teaser. Sound like minions. Hey, look. There is a participation in the idea of the good, but on the other hand, there is the disposition of the good still greater honor. So not only is there a good self beyond what we've been looking at in the divided line, because that fourth section, the higher section, nous, is the experiencing of the good, the idea of the good. So we said, well, what's the good that's beyond it that Socrates isn't talking about? Whatever it is, there is also a disposition, meaning there is some state of self associated with that which is beyond even experience. That's fascinating. Isn't that fascinating? Beyond even the enlightenment experience, there is something, and it can be a disposition. There is some sort of integration, some possibility or capacity for us to integrate it into our way of being. Holy crap.
Hey, whoa. Who asked you? No, okay, go ahead.
He better not.
We better.
That's where you live, in the weirdo pool. You're going around doing that in the weirdo pool. That's you.
No, this is beyond the weirdo pool. This is the best pool, it seems. Anyway, I'm not getting into that now. That's just, it's there right before where we pick up today. So, yeah, another teaser. Here we are. We went on a bit further. So, the ideas of knowledge and truth are known. So the knowable, those ideas, now then, says Socrates, we may also say that those ideas of knowledge and truth that are known are not only provided the means by which they are nous, intuitively known, intuitively seen by the good. So the good creates the means by which we can have that fourth level. Remember the fourth level? This guy here. But also their very being and their ousia. Remember ousia? Its essence by way of turning about and knowing itself. And also it's that eye, that sixth sense that is able to comprehend it, experience it, whatever. I'm tired. So the good, so their very being and their ousia are derived from that source. So there is, beyond the greatest experience is a cause of it, allowing the means for us to know it, but also creating the being of it and the ousia of it. The ousia is not the good, since the good transcends beyond the ousia in both dignity, rank, value, and in power. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow.
Don't be disgusting.
Don't be disgusting. So somebody who's in the level of being of pure ousia, experiencing the divine bliss of the divine light of being, will say, don't be disgusting. The good is beyond it.
You've been a bad little girl and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now?
We need not spank them, Emma. But we might point out that the good still transcends ousia in its rank and power. So, after Socrates drops that bomb on Glaucon's ass, Glaucon says, holy crap, Jesus, holy Jehoshaphat, and Jesus and Mary and Muhammad and all of the saints in the sky. Or his equivalent of that, Apollo of hyperbolic heights of daemons. Socrates says, hang on there, son. Socrates says,
Too stupid to understand,
No.
and also refusing to understand. Why not both, right?
no. Socrates says,
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Socrates says,
Don't be disgusting.
don't be disgusting. Got there. Because you are the cause for having compelled me to say that which appears to be the case concerning self. Remember, This is our koan because we're interested in ourselves. We're interested in removing our problems. We're interested in knowing what we are. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What should we be doing while we're here? And what's the real self? How far does the self go? What's the reach of the self? What isn't the self? So Socrates is saying, hey, the self is also the good, transcending being or ousia in rank and power. Holy crap.
And I find that very entertaining.
And R.M. Brown finds that very entertaining. Glaucon replies, and indeed, by no means stop. I'll stop with the sound drops for a while, so I can read. And indeed, by no means stop. If something, and our author is saying, hey, maybe he's saying, if your divine daemon doesn't. Socrates talks about having that voice of the self that Socrates says he doesn't tell him what to do, but he says, don't do certain things if he's going to do something he shouldn't. Anyway, that's the author adding that he thinks that's what Glaucon is referring to when he says, hey, if something doesn't stop you, he means if his daemon doesn't stop him. So that's another puzzle. What the heck is the daemon? We did see that talked about in the Meno as well. So Glaucon says, hey, if something doesn't stop you, please do in turn discuss the comparison relating to the sun that we skipped over before. So use the sun analogy to talk about the good. If you've left anything out, Socrates says, well, I must certainly leave out a lot of things, actually, because
Unbelievable sluts these days.
Because Glaucon's an unbelievable slut these days. And Glaucon says, please do not cast aside the smallest detail. Socrates says, I think, on the one hand, well, I will omit a lot, actually. However, it's, as far as I'm able, I won't omit anything, but I will omit a lot, but not because I don't want to. Not willingly, just a puzzle. Why does he not go into the most important part of the divided line? Please do not, says Glaucon. Intellect then, just as we declare self to be dual, that one is king over the intelligible place, and the other is king over the visible, the actual sun. There's the king of our visible world is the sun. That's what he was talking about earlier. Just as the idea of the good is king over the intelligible realm. One is the visible, one is the intelligible. Now then, just as you took a line that has been cut into two unequal sections, cut them again, each section in the same ratio. As a puzzle, what if instead of same ratio, there was an actual self-logos ratio or proportion? Don't know, but we'll carry that for later. Both that of the visible genus and that of the intelligible. Then you'll have clarity and obscurity in relation to each other. So that was when we did this. We went to the wrong screen. That was when we drew the line here. This recording you. So draw a line, cut it, the visible and the intelligible. One is obscurity, one is clarity. And then using that same ratio, about a quarter of this line, then cut the visible one according to a quarter and this one a quarter. And then we get that mysterious fact that these two are the same. See, they're the same. What does that mean, I wonder? Don't know. In the visible realm, you have images. In the first place, I call the shadows, the images, and in the next place, those reflections in water. I don't think this doesn't really make sense. Yeah, yeah, two different uses of the word place. So I call it the shadows, the images, reflections in waters, and like images that coalesce in mirrors, which are dense and smooth and bright. Anything of this kind. Okay, the first realm is of shadows and images and reflections. Now, in the place in the other section of so now we've gone to the other section of the visible. That's the confusing place. In the next place, I don't think doesn't make sense. I think in that place next, these two words should be flipped. Because the other section, there are only two sections in the visible. We've got images, shadows, reflections in the first part. Now the other part of the visible, this one here, number 2. This resembles animals that surround us in every kind of plant and the whole class of man-made objects. Now we recognize he's using a metaphor here. Man-made objects, man-made beliefs. Now, later on he calls it trust or belief. Now because we've already seen it, we're reading it a second time, we can recognize what the heck is a man-made object? Oh yeah, he calls it belief. So now we can put 2 and 2 together. Man-made beliefs? Oh, could that be the pathologos? Wink, wink. The very thing that we're studying in midwifery. So, what started as metaphor of man-made objects, and then later on, he called it trust or belief, man-made beliefs. The second realm is our object of focus in midwifery. Man-made beliefs that we carry on our heads. Now, in chapter 7, he goes into the cave analogy, and he actually has people carrying man-made objects on their heads. But we won't go into that now, but it's in there. The reason we're reading this is we're understanding the model or the paradigm of the levels of cognition so that we can get a sense of what we're dealing with in midwifery and the significance of learning this new art to allow for human evolution. It's crossing this line that Glaucon wasn't able to cross, but somehow Socrates was. Well, we say somehow. He tells us in the Republic in Book 9, dream analysis and midwifery, just like Achilles in Homer. So, this is what we're doing in midwifery, focusing on that. Neat? Yes. Wow, isn't it? So, will you be willing to say that the self of the visible section be divided into... No, no. Would you be willing to say that self can be divided into the real and unreal, such that the opinable is to the knowable, just as the likeness is to that which is of its likeness? Okay? So we're going to ignore the translator helping us out with these brackets and just read the text as it is. So we've got the self of the divided line divided into 2 sections. And just as the opinable is to the intelligible realm, so too its likeness is to its object. So our image thinking, shapes and colors people, stuck in our pathologos problem, projecting our crap onto others and getting mad at it and justifying slavery and fascism, which is just pathologos with extra steps. Our image thinking is a shadow of our beliefs that cause it. That's why We do midwifery so we can address the cause of our zombie way of thinking, our barbarian way of thinking as an animal. We're animals, like it or not. But also we can gain an insight in what we are doing what we will be doing when we cross that line, because just as image thinking is a shadow of its object, our beliefs, so too dianoia is itself a shadow of nous. Isn't that interesting? This art, the highest functioning that we can do as a human in time, is itself a shadow of being. And that's what we're learning in midwifery, because it's this, the shadow of being, or dianoia, that we use to facilitate midwifery. In the greatest art, the healing art. Excuse me. So, just as the opinable realm is to the knowable, so too the likeness is to that of the likeness in the other one. Let us consider in which way the section of the intelligible must be divided. In what way? So the soul uses the objects in one section of self as images that she was compelled to investigate at one time, as if from hypotheses, not reaching the beginning but to an end. Okay? Just as people think that they are thinking here, they think that they are creating hypotheses. I think that we should have Republicans. I think that we should have genocide. I think that we should have slavery. They think that's a hypothesis. It isn't. That's why they can't change their mind. That's why we're locked in our problems. We still have Nazis. We still have capitalism. That's absurd, right? It's not actually a hypothesis. It's like a hypothesis. We think we're doing a hypothesis, but we're really not reaching the beginning. We're reaching a conclusion, an end. So our image thinking is a shadow of the beliefs that we carry with us from childhood, thus the need for midwifery. And all it does is lead us to that end. That's what we see in midwifery. That's why we call it fate. The first and final cause is the pathologos until you're free of it. Meaning, the pathologos is the first cause. It's the cause of your thinking. What you think is thinking is just image thinking. But it's also the end. In other words, our life becomes a way of playing out the implications of our problem to create a situation where we can play out our belief on someone else. Whether it be Netanyahu bombing Palestinian children, whether it be Trump sending KKK people to abduct brown people. The same shit that happened to them. That's why people are saying, hang on a second, we know that he was a racist. We know that his dad was a KKK guy. Why did we allow him to be running for election? It seems insane. Now, what we need to do is add the intelligibility of what we recognize intuitively. We recognize that certain people, all human beings, have fundamental beliefs that cause their thinking, cause them to play out the script like an NPC, and what they think is hypothesis doesn't reach the beginning of everything, it reaches that end again. It's a loop. It's stagnant. That's why it's a redundant analogy. That's the analogy that we saw was redundant. It's not a true teaching. Stagnant. It's the cause of our thinking, and our thinking is just to create that, to go back to that belief again, to sit in daddy's chair. All right, so as we saw, that's the problem that humans have stuck in the visible realm. So too, and the significance of midwifery. In the other section, the intelligible section, the soul proceeds from actual hypotheses to an unhypothetical beginning, arche. Without none of those images, but by the eidos cells. we use the aspects of the intelligible, beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself, same and different, like and unlike, the terms that we get from the Republic and the Symposium and the Parmenides. We wonder about that in philosophy, and we create actual hypotheses when we practice the dialectic, which we've been encouraging people to do in our channel and share in our Discord. Why? Because it facilitates that non-hypothetical direct experience verifying our hypotheses, our ifs that we carry in our if sack, in our inventory.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it's interesting that the cause of human problems is similar to what we are supposed to be doing here. Our allegiance to our issues as human problems is a shadow of our true philosophical quest in here, to actually master the hypotheses, apply it through the dialectic, to know the nature of being. Interesting? Yes.
Wow.
So, by using the ideal selves, she makes her methodical way through selves, through those ideas. Falcon says, I don't get it, and we say, thank goodness. Socrates says, you will more easily understand because these matters, okay, and he goes into the geometry and stuff. This is, You want to read this? This is long-winded and boring. I'm going to skip it. I'll skip to the end of it. People who do math take axioms as self-evident. They don't explore them. They use them. Whereas in philosophy, we try and get to reach them and know them ourselves. That's the essence of the second one. Not reading is boring. We read it. Now, while they make use of the visible forms and figures, they reason about selves. Their understanding is not employed about these. Oh my goodness. This is more geometry stuff for the sake of the square and then making a diameter and blah, 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 blah. But what they're making use of are things that they cannot see except if they wanted to use dianoia. But they don't. They take them as self-evident axioms. Now then, notice we recognize when we did chapter 3 of midwifery, we recognize that axiom is remember how we had the 5 classes of belief? Pathologos is the worst, then prejudice, then supernatural or absurd beliefs that can't be proven, then simple beliefs. Enough. I believe my car needs petrol. It's not a supernatural belief, but I don't really understand why. Scientific beliefs, which are backed by reason and evidence, and axioms, self-evident truths. Adding 2 things together, you're going to get a bigger number, that kind of thing. Or things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. The principle of coincidence. Sameness. Now he's saying geometricians use that axiom, but they don't explore the axiom. And we talked about how that axiom is the hyparxis. In other words, if you recognize there are certain axioms you take for granted in loving of learning, like math and stuff, or even in politics. Hey, shouldn't we be using principles that are universally true, that benefit everyone, that everyone can share in? So no genocide or capitalism or slavery? Once you realize that should be an axiom, that we should take it for granted, but some people don't, as soon as you wonder about those axioms themselves, then you can transition into philosophy. Because Socrates is saying here, they make use of them, but they don't examine them. When we wonder about, hey, what is the cause? Where are those principles? What is the goodness itself? What is true justice? Now we have upgraded from the highest use of learning in the physical realm to philosophy. Hypothesis. Now, I call this the intelligible class, whereas since the soul was compelled to use hypotheses in the investigation of self, by not being able to disengage herself and rise above the hypotheses, she does not proceed to a principle. Okay, still talking. Yeah, that's what I just said. They don't go to those principles. They don't go above. Yeah. That's all the geometry stuff. That's the boring stuff. Let's keep going. We unpacked that last time. Moreover, understand that the other section of the intelligible, that which the self-logos touches, by the power of dialectics, by making use of the hypotheses, not as principles like the geometricians use them, but as truly hypotheses, as if they were means of accessing and impulses, in order that by proceeding as far as that to the unhypothetical, not a hypothesis anymore, it's a confirmation, origin of all, by coming in contact with self, the self-logos may then keep holding on to the ideas that are maintained by her. That self-logos may in this way descend to the end, without making any use of the sensible. And maybe that's that puzzle, because here we've got using the dialectic now that we've done midwifery to cross that line. We can reach the origin of all, nous, section 4. So we use the dialectic in midwifery to free ourselves from human problems. Now that we're free, oh, that delete. Weird. Right. We can use the self-logos and dialectic to reach that unhypothetical origin of all, but then in turn, after we have that nous experience, the self-logos can hold on to it. So we have the reaching, we have the holding on to it. It's not just a one-off trip. It's not just a meditation trip or a drug trip or a dream trip or a however you get it trip. Because we've used the dialectic to get there, we can also use our understanding to maintain it. And the third use, the self-logos can in that way go beyond to the end. Just as we used the dialectic and self-logos in midwifery to free ourselves from that realm, in leaving there, we carry the dialectic in our back pocket that we can now use here, focused on the ideal selves to reach this, but also we can use it now to maintain this, and then use it to go beyond this. In other words, this dialectic we've been practicing all the way along, we can apply it not just to hold on to the experience by understanding it, but understand the cause of that. Just as we understood the cause of our problems in midwifery, can't we also we understood the cause of our beliefs in midwifery, couldn't we also understand the cause of nous? Those are the three descriptions of how the self-logos, the love of understanding, the dialectic, is used. And we're adding the fourth, midwifery. One, to reach nous, to maintain nous, and to go beyond and reach the end. This realm. Proceeding through selves into self, and finally terminate its procession in ideas. Now, then we have Glaucon's problem. Glaucon says, I understand, but not sufficiently, because you seem to be speaking of a massive work. Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's what we're here for. It's the meaning of why we're here. Person. Very massive. Well said, Glaucon. However, you wish to determine that by contemplating being and the intelligible, by the knowledge of the dialectics, is more clear than the discoveries made by the other so-called arts, which use hypotheses as their principles or axioms, and that those who theorize selves are compelled to contemplate with their understanding, but not with their senses. But because they do not consider ascending to the principle itself, except from hypotheses, they appear to you not to possess intellect in relation to the selves. Although selves are intelligible, when considered in conjunction with that principle, you appear then to me to call that habit of these geometricians and people like them as understanding, but not nous. By having understanding, dianoia, subsisting somewhere between opinion and intellect. And we said to that, got some parts right. Like the geometricians kind of use these axioms but stay in the visible realm. Then he said, well, so it's kind of like geometricians are kind of using understanding, so it's somehow between the realm of opinion and the intelligible realm, somewhere in here maybe, crossing both, and he's got it right. Because he said the opposite. They don't use dianoia. They use belief, scientific belief, and they make use of axioms. But yeah, geometricians and physicists and materialists and everyone else who isn't in this game, stuck over here. Allowing us to understand Glaucon's problem, and one of the reasons why Socrates might have left this part out in his conversation with Glaucon. Yeah, you've taken my meaning sufficiently. Now, he often says the word sufficiently at certain times through the text, and so it's carrying a lot of weight, and it does at other times too. So, corresponding to the four sections, there are four experiences in the soul. Intellection is the highest section, nous. Dianoia is the second. Trust or belief, pistis, is the third. Image thinking is the last. And arrange selves analogously, being led to believe that just as the experiences which they represent participate in truth, so too clarity. The truth represents the thing itself. Clarity represents our perception, our cognition. One is the thing itself, or ontology if you're fancy, what exists in ontos, being, what is, and epistemology, how we know. Those are the two things in philosophy that they look at. What exists and how do we know that it. Ontology and epistemology. But we don't have to use fancy words. So, truth represents what is real. Clarity represents how clearly we can perceive. our world. So people stuck with the pathologos, obscure, untrue. Freedom from our pathologos allows us to see more clearly and perceive truth better. And then applied to that, gets it there, and then maintain it, and then go beyond it. As a principle for all living beings, especially human beings, but anyone who's evolved to logos and ousia. Language and self-reflection. Therefore, a principle, the principle. So, saves time. You don't have to watch any more debates. It's just this. How well do we implement this will be the conversations from now on. Because you're going to share this video with all of your friends and your grandmas. And your grandmas will tell their grandmas, and then their grandmas will tell their grandmas, and then suddenly everyone in the world will know it. Because everybody listens to their grandma. Right?
What feminists want is to specifically ruin your life.
No. I don't like that idea. So, truth and clarity. Nous at the highest, dianoia the second, pistis, trust or belief third, image thinking the last. Glaucon says, I understand. We say, no, you not really. I concur, and I arrange them as you say. Well, he's not going to arrange them as he says. He's a bit stuck, but we can. And we can see, therefore, if we were to arrange selves analogously using this principle, there might be a question here. Now, it might be easier to see if we recognize the self-logos proportion is itself a kind of mean analogy. Mean analogy, meaning as one is to these two that are equal, as A is to B is to C, perhaps there is a question here. As the visible is to the intelligible, so to the intelligible is to what, and how would you draw it? Now, when we get back into book 6, we're going to see more of that puzzle and discover what he's actually telling us to do at the end of book 6. A puzzle that Glaucon probably won't be able to do, but we can. Hooray for us. But for now, we're going to be happy with this. By understanding what exactly we're doing in midwifery, how it's for everyone, therefore no need for slavery or justification of slavery through inflicting suffering or punishment for having a problem. And if we realize that's stupid, then we don't have to have the other bullshit of people trying to get in positions of wealth and power so they can project their problem and punish them instead of themselves. Projection, anger, frustration, viciousness. Not about things they're not interested in. They're not being vicious to puppies. They're being vicious to the people who they're reflecting their problems on. Like sexist, the beautiful women. The priests saying, oh, the gays, oh, they're so bad, aren't they bad? All the gays should go to hell. By the way, I would really like a nice, juicy man right now. So no need for that. Irrational projection and infliction of suffering. By recognizing that we are all here because we have a puzzle. Our problems are not justifications for inflicting suffering or slavery. It's a puzzle. The art we're here to master is the dialectic and self-logos. Applied to freeing ourselves from our problems is midwifery. The the love of Philodynoia, allowing us to make this transition that even the greatest geometers are not able to make. So that's where we get our freedom and we become mature and rational. But also we take this dialectic that we've learned in making that jump, because we're not passive, we're learning it as we get midwifed ourselves, to then apply that dialectic and self-logos, that dianoia, to the intelligible realm to wake up our nous, and then apply it to our insight to maintain that, use it as a model of beauty and justice, especially when we're midwifing, and also, so to get it, to maintain it, and then to apply that understanding to that, to wonder about its cause, to go beyond it, and then finish the divided line. This is for everyone, making it universal. If this is the nature of the good, and understanding of it is required to act most good to others, whether they be in midwifery or whether they be people who are free trying to know this, or whether they are people who have this wisdom and we want to help them go beyond, dianoia is the art needed to help in that, help in that, help in that. It's universal, it's for everyone. It's the good and therefore what benefits. It helps you reach the good, understand the good, know the good, and know what's beyond the good. The good itself, that's the cause of the experience of good, meaning it's, one more time, it's universal, it's good and what benefits. It's therefore the art we are here to learn. We can call it the love, therefore, of understanding, philodynoia. Therefore, it's the principle. It's the principle, therefore, that we need to apply to our lives, our relationships, at all times. How we treat ourselves in a good, kind, friendly, loving way. How we treat our friends and our partners, our loved ones, in a good, kind, friendly way. And therefore, how we arrange our society. This is the archetypal principle. The axiom, but known. That's what we're learning here. So, I'm glad that you are here learning this with me, considering how important it is in all of those things. I hope you are very curious and puzzled about it. That's the whole game. But also, use your curiosity. That's your koan. Create dialectics about it, as we've been doing today. And you can join the Discord to share them with your friends here, if you like. You can follow along on Twitch. You can like and subscribe on YouTube. You can donate underneath if you like. And if you're on the Discord, you'll get a notification when we go live. Isn't it neat? Aren't we in the best game? One more cheer for us. And thank you once again for joining me on this journey. It's not a solo quest. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.